By 2 in the morning, the fluorescent lights in St. Brigid's emergency department gave everyone the same exhausted skin tone. Todd Sullivan had stopped noticing years ago, the same way he stopped noticing the rattle in the vent above Triage Bay 3 and the way the automatic ambulance doors sighed open even when no one was there, as if the building itself expected bad news to walk in eventually. He sat behind the triage desk with a paper cup of coffee gone cold, one sneaker tapping under his chair while he scanned the waiting room. A teenager with a split eyebrow holding a blood-soaked hoodie against his face. An older woman with oxygen tubing from home and a swollen ankle trying not to cry in front of her daughter. A truck driver sweating through chest pain but still insisting he just needed antacid. Todd had a way of sorting all of it without making people feel sorted. He could ask 3 questions and hear the 4th answer in someone's breathing. "Mr. Delaney," he called, already standing. "Let's get that EKG now, not in 15 minutes. The trucker blinked up. "Is it that obvious?" Todd gave him a half smile. "Only to me. Come on." That was his job in one motion. Urgency without panic. St. Brigid's sat at the edge of county lines where budgets went to die. It served farm roads that disappeared under spring mud, trailer parks where propane heaters kicked over at midnight, and a belt of industrial riverfront where accidents happened in clusters and ambulances came in late, crowded and apologizing before the doors even opened. On overnight, there was no spare anything, no spare staff, no spare beds, no spare patients. Todd held the seams together because somebody had to. He did it quietly. He slipped granola bars to diabetic patients waiting too long. He de-escalated drunks by speaking to them like men with names instead of problems with wristbands. When social services logged off and discharge was still 2 people away from sleeping under the overpass, Todd sometimes swiped his own card for a cab and called it miscellaneous supply. "St. Sullivan," one of the medics liked to say, and Todd always answered the same way. "Don't call me that, unless you're carrying your own stretcher." Outside, rain had started before midnight and never really stopped. It changed tempo, fine needles, then heavy sheets, then steady hiss. But it stayed. Dawn approached in theory, not in light. The sky beyond the ambulance bay windows remained a deep, bruised grey. Around 5:30, as shift fatigue settled into everyone's shoulders, Officer Mendez from security leaned over the triage counter with a face that announced he had one more minor annoyance he wanted Todd to validate. "Your friend's back," Mendez said. Todd didn't look up from charting. "I have a lot of friends." "The dog. The ugly one." Todd turned then, and through the bay glass he saw him. A scruffy brindle stray, medium-sized, ears nicked, fur plastered dark by rain. The dog moved with a purposeful lope to the overhang, dropped something near the automatic doors, and backed away, watching. "A nuisance," Mendez said. "I told facilities to call animal control yesterday." Todd stood and crossed to the window. Near the threshold sat a single glove. Heavy duty, insulated, the kind refinery workers wore in winter. Wet through, caked with thin grey grit that looked like machine dust mixed with river mud. "Same as before?" Todd asked. "Another glove, yeah, like we're running a lost and found for hardware stores." It wasn't the first. For almost a week, every dawn when Todd's shift thinned and day staff hadn't fully arrived, the dog appeared and left one glove. Never a pair, never clean. One day orange-lined and slick with grease. One day cracked leather with burrs from brushland. One day blue rubberized, smelling faintly of diesel. Then gone before anyone got close. Todd had started checking where they came from, as if clues might announce themselves if he lined them up in his locker. Different brands, different sizes, all work gloves, all soaked with weather and labor. "You feed him?" Mendez asked. "No." "You sure?" Todd gave him a look. Mendez sighed. "Fine, but if he bites somebody..." Admin's going to pretend this never happened and ask why I didn't do my job. The dog held still beyond the sensor range of the doors, rain tracing his ribs. His eyes stayed on Todd, then flicked toward the road, then back. Todd pushed through the vestibule and crouched, one hand open. "Hey, buddy." The dog did not approach. He stepped back once, as if maintaining a boundary Todd didn't understand, then trotted off the bay apron and vanished around the corner of the oxygen cage. By 6, the glove was bagged in lost property and Todd was back in triage, telling a man with a panic attack that he was not dying, even if his body was shouting otherwise. It should have been another end-of-shift oddity, filed with the rest. Strange, inconvenient, unresolved. Then the weather alert tone went off overhead. Every phone in the department chirped at once. Monitor screens flickered with the same red banner. Severe thunderstorm warning upgraded. Flash flood emergency. Seek high ground immediately. Someone at registration muttered, "Great," with the flat resignation of people who knew storms never arrived alone. They brought car wrecks, generator failures, chainsaw lacerations, downed line burns, and families who waited too long to leave low ground. Within 20 minutes, the first ambulance came in hot, then 2 more behind it. A rollover on Route 14. Then a multiple vehicle collision near the rail crossing when visibility dropped to nothing. The waiting room tripled. Wet footprints streaked the tile. Jackets dripped onto plastic chairs. Overhead speakers kept spitting pages. Respiratory to Trauma 2, LabStat to Pod C, security to Bay entrance. Todd moved fast enough to feel slow. Red tag, yellow tag. Clear this bed. Start that line. Reassure this mother. Interrupt that argument before it turned into a fight. At some point, he looked toward registration and noticed the bulletin board had fresh flyers taped at eye level, already curling at the corners from humidity. Missing. Marco, 10, and Lena Ortiz, 7. Last seen near Riverside Industrial Park. If found, call sheriff's office immediately. A grainy photo showed 2 kids shoulder to shoulder in winter coats too big for them. Behind them, barely in frame, stood a man in a reflective work jacket, hand on their heads. Their father, maybe. The caption beneath said he hadn't returned from a refinery shift 3 nights ago. Vehicle located, children unaccounted for. Todd read it once, then got pulled away to a patient with slurred speech and blood pressure diving. By 7:15, thunder rolled close enough to vibrate the IV poles. And then the dog came back. Not at dawn this time, not in quiet. He shot through the rain into the ambulance overhang, shivering so hard his shoulders jolted, and dropped another glove right in the track where the doors opened. A little girl's winter glove, purple knit, one fingertip chewed open, the cuff stamped with tiny white stars now stained with mud. Todd froze with a stack of wristbands in his hand. From behind him, Mendez swore. How is he getting in here every time? The doors whooshed. The dog darted just inside, paws skidding on tile, and looked straight at Todd. He barked once sharp, then ran back to the threshold. Turned, barked again. "Todd!" Charge Nurse Carla snapped from across the desk. "Need you in triage 2 now." He didn't move. The dog barked, bolted into the rain, then reappeared seconds later as if to check whether Todd had understood. Back and forth, back and forth. Urgent, patterned, impossible to mistake once seen. Not begging, not scavenging, leading. Todd bent and picked up the child's glove. It was soaked and icy, and there was a faint chemical tang beneath the wet wool, like solvent and rust. He looked toward registration where the missing flyer trembled in the air vent's draft. Purple coat in the photo. Little white stars near the cuff. His stomach dropped. "Carla," he called louder. She strode over, face flushed from managing 3 crises at once. "If this is about the dog, I swear to God." He held up the glove. This matches the missing kid bulletin. Her eyes flicked, recalculating, but only for a beat. Then call Sheriff Dispatch and hand it over. You cannot leave this desk. He's trying to take us somewhere. He's a stray in a storm. He's been bringing work gloves for days. All from the same area, I think. Grease, mud, industrial grit. This isn't random. Carla's jaw tightened. Todd, listen to me. We are at surge capacity. We have active traumas inbound and half the county underwater. You walking out because of a dog is not heroic, it's negligent. Behind her, another stretcher barreled in. A paramedic shouted for respiratory support. Somewhere a child cried in the waiting room, thin and panicked. Todd knew she was right. By policy, by staffing, by every risk management lecture he'd ever sat through. Triage nurses did not leave the department in emergencies. They were the intake valve. If the valve walked away, pressure blew somewhere else. The dog barked again, high and frantic, then disappeared into curtains of rain. Todd imagined two kids in a place that smelled like chemicals and cold water rising step by step. Imagined them waiting for a father who might already be down. Imagined the window where they watched for headlights that never came. He imagined that dog making run after run in the dark, carrying whatever he could pick up as proof, coming to the only place with lights on all night and people who sometimes listened. If Todd stayed and that was true, those children might die while he triaged sprains and fevers and fender benders with textbook correctness. If he went and was wrong, he'd leave a drowning ER short-staffed, maybe cost someone inside these walls. He could lose his job, his license, maybe worse, if anyone got hurt because he broke chain of command. The moral math did not balance cleanly. It never did in real life. It only demanded a choice. He was already moving toward the staff locker before he finished deciding. "Don't," Carla said, following him 2 steps. Her voice dropped, anger thinning into warning. "I'm ordering you to stay." He yanked open the locker, grabbed the compact trauma bag he kept for off-site drills, stuffed in chem lights, thermal blankets, spare gauze, portable pulse ox, 1 small oxygen cylinder. His fingers shook once and then steadied. "I'm not freelancing," he said. "I'll sign temporary field leave, call location updates every 10 minutes, and coordinate with dispatch. You can document I ignored your directive. You should." She stared at him, rain thundering against the bay doors. For a second he thought she might physically block him. Then she swore under her breath and slammed a clipboard onto the bench. "Sign it," she said, "and if you die, I am going to kill you." He scribbled his name, time, destination, unknown. Mendez appeared with a yellow slicker and a flashlight like he'd been listening from the hall. "Sheriff has units tied up at the spill perimeter by a rail yard," Mendez said. "Road closures everywhere. You go out there, you may not get back fast." Todd took the slicker. "Call dispatch now. Tell them possible link to Ortiz children, probable industrial zone, tracking by K9. Mendez hesitated, then keyed his radio. As Todd pushed through the ambulance doors, wind hit him sideways hard enough to steal breath. Rain needled his face. Sirens braided in the distance with thunder. Under the sodium lot light, the brindle dog stood in ankle-deep runoff, waiting, eyes bright and fixed. Todd clutched the purple glove in one hand and the trauma bag in the other. "All right," he said into the storm, to the dog, to himself, to whatever line he had just crossed. "Show me." The dog spun and ran. Todd followed. The dog cut across the employee lot like he'd memorized every pothole. Todd splashed after him, water slapping over the tops of his sneakers in the first 10 strides. The yellow slicker Mendez had handed him snapped in the wind like a torn sail. At the edge of the lot, the dog veered through a break in the chain-link fence where maintenance carts sometimes passed, then down a service lane already running like a creek. "Todd Sullivan, St. Bridget's ER. Todd yelled into his phone, cupping it under his hood as he ran. I'm in pursuit of possible lead on the Ortiz children, heading east from St. Brigid's Ambulance Bay on foot, following a stray canine that delivered probable evidence. Dispatch came back in bursts of static and clipped syllables. Copy possible Ortiz, units tied up, repeat direction. East, he said, hopping a curb that had disappeared under muddy water, toward Industrial Riverfront. The dog glanced back once to make sure he was still there, then kept going. They crossed Maple Underpass, where two abandoned cars sat nose down in floodwater, hazards blinking weakly like trapped fireflies. Todd skirted them and nearly went to his knee in a storm drain hidden under brown flow. He caught himself on a mailbox post, shoulder-wrenching, trauma bag banging against his hip. The dog barked from 20 yards ahead. Impatient, commanding, the sound sharp enough to cut through thunder. Coming, Todd muttered through clenched teeth. He passed a trailer park entrance where residents were hauling plastic bins into pickup beds under porch lights. Someone shouted for him to get off the road. Someone else pointed at downed lines sparking in a side ditch. Todd gave the wires a wide berth, the metallic smell of ozone and wet dirt burning his nose, and followed the dog into a narrow alley between a shuttered laundromat and a cinder block auto parts store. The alley emptied onto Orchard Street, then curved toward the rail district where the whole horizon pulsed blue-red from emergency strobes. A sheriff SUV blocked the intersection with sawhorses and hazard tape, whipping in the wind. Two deputies in rain gear waved him down before he got close. "Road's closed," one shouted. "Chemical release by the yard. Turn around." Todd held up his badge on the retractable clip around his neck, then immediately hated how useless that felt out here. ER nurse. Possible trapped children beyond perimeter. Ortiz siblings. The deputy's expression changed at the name, then hardened again. Fire hazmat has command. Nobody through without PPE and assignment. I'm not trying to sightsee. A dog led me here from the hospital carrying this. He shoved the purple glove toward the deputy's flashlight beam. The deputy stared, jaw working. Even if that's theirs, I can't send you into a spill zone in street clothes. Another bark sounded from behind the barricade. The brindle dog stood on the far side of hazard tape in pounding rain, just visible between two derelict freight trailers. He barked twice, spun, and disappeared down a slope toward the drainage easement. Todd looked from the place where the dog vanished to the deputy. If those kids are alive, they are not going to be alive forever. And if you go down, I've got another body in the water, the deputy shot back. Don't make me arrest you to keep you here. Static crackled from Todd's phone again. Dispatch tried to raise him, failed, came back as a warble of syllables. No signal bars. He took one step back, then another, nodding like he was conceding. Understood. He turned away from the barricade, cut behind a row of rusting dumpsters, and dropped into the drainage easement, where the dog had gone. The ditch current hit his calves hard enough to twist him sideways. He grabbed a fence post, breathed once, and pushed on. The easement ran parallel to the blocked road, hidden from the deputies by brush and stacked pallets, then ducked under a pipe rack and spilled behind a line of abandoned loading bays. The dog waited under one bay awning, soaked and vibrating with urgency, then set off again the second Todd reached him. You are either the smartest dog in this county, Todd puffed, or I'm making the worst decision of my life. The dog did not dignify that with a glance. They zigzagged through industrial backlots where faded signs leaned crooked in the rain. No parking. Active dock over doors chained shut for years. Twice Todd lost him in sheets of water and found him again by bark, alone. Twice he climbed to higher ground just long enough to try calling out location updates. The first call dropped after 6 seconds. The second connected long enough for Carla's voice to punch through the weather. Todd, where are you? North of rail yard perimeter, he gasped. Dog bypassed closure through drainage, headed upriver, I think toward old warehouses. You think, she snapped, fear disguised as fury. Fire Command wants coordinates, not feelings. He slid down a muddy embankment and nearly lost the phone. Tell them I'm trying. There's chemical odor in pockets, probably runoff. I have one portable O2. Limited supplies. Todd. The line died. By the time he reached the river service road, both his socks were saturated, his fingers were numb, and rain had turned to needles that seemed to come sideways and up at once. The dog slowed for the first time, trotting now instead of sprinting, nose low, tracking an invisible map through puddled asphalt and knee-high weeds. Ahead, beyond a row of skeletal cottonwoods bent by wind, a hulking brick building rose out of the storm. 3 stories, windows mostly boarded, loading docks half collapsed. Riverside Glove Recycling Company. The painted letters were ghosted but readable whenever lightning strobed white across the wall. The dog stopped at the edge of the lot and looked at Todd. The lot itself was a mess of floating debris, plastic drums, a child's red sled, splintered pallets, and everywhere snagged against chain link, plastered to concrete, lodged in the weeds. Gloves. Work gloves by the dozen. Orange-lined winter gloves, blue rubberized pairs, cracked leather gauntlets, knit liners, one firefighter-style extrication glove with reflective piping. Some new, some shredded, all soaked and dirty. Todd stood in the rain and felt the pattern click into place with a terrible, elegant certainty. Not random offerings, not scavenged trophies. A trail. The dog had been carrying what this place was made of, what this place smelled like, what this place had in abundance from here to the one place awake at dawn where humans might respond, St. Brigid's ER, for days. A thin metallic pounding reached him then. 3 knocks, pause, 3 knocks. Faint. Above flood noise, above thunder. Todd swung toward the building. Hello? 3 knocks again from high and inside. He ran for the nearest personnel door, only to have a flashlight beam slam into his face. Stop right there, a voice barked. 2 men in black rain shells stepped from under a side canopy, both with Wexler site security patches on their sleeves. One held a flashlight, the other a radio and a handgun still holstered but visible. Behind them, a white contractor truck idled with magnetic hazard lights spinning. This structure is restricted, flashlight guy said. No entry, flood instability. Todd yanked his hood back so they could see his face. I'm a triage nurse. There are people in there. Fire department has been notified, the second one said. We've got orders to keep civilians out until structural and hazmat assess. There are children banging from inside right now. Todd pointed upward. Listen. They did listen. For a beat, even through rain, the knocking carried. Flashlight guy's expression tightened, but he shook his head. Doesn't change protocol. Todd took a step forward. Protocol gets them drowned if they're on a mezzanine and water's rising. And you going in without gear gives us 2 rescue targets instead of 1, radio guy said. Back up. The dog shot between Todd and the guards, splashed to another entrance around the corner, and began scratching furiously at a corrugated metal panel half hidden by stacked crates. He knows a way in, Todd said. Nobody's going in, flashlight guy repeated, louder now, as if volume could make physics different. Todd's first instinct was to keep arguing until one of them relented. He could feel the urge in his chest, like a match head. Prove you're right. Force the door. Move. Then he looked at the waterline staining the brick, looked at the electrical conduit drooping from a broken junction box, and heard Carla in his head asking for coordinates, not feelings. Being right was worthless if he got everyone killed. He stepped back, held up both hands. Fine, I'm not breaching blind. Both guards relaxed by half an inch. Todd turned away, climbed onto the contractor truck's running board for 1 bar of signal, and called 911 again. This time he got through. Active entrapment at Riverside Glove Recycling upriver from rail yard spill perimeter, he said in one breath. At least 3 victims, including 2 children, audible from interior mezzanine. Floodwater rising. Possible chemical exposure. I am medically trained and on scene with limited kit. The dispatcher snapped into command cadence. Sir, identify yourself and whether you are in the structure. Todd Sullivan, RN, St. Brigid's ER. Exterior currently. Stay exterior and await fire rescue. He looked at the dog, still clawing at that side panel, then back at the boarded windows, and the steady 3-knock signal now slower, weaker. Negative, Todd said quietly. I can provide immediate triage if I can establish a safe path. I need fire command patched now. There was a pause, then another voice came on, older, clipped, carrying the compressed calm of someone managing 6 disasters at once. This is Battalion 7. Who am I speaking to? Todd repeated his name and location, gave landmarks, wind direction, visible water depth, number of access points he could see. As he spoke, he pulled chem lights from his trauma bag, snapped one, and watched green fluorescence bleed through the storm-grey morning. Do not freelance heroics, Mr. Sullivan, Battalion 7 said. Technical rescue and swift water units are en route. ETA, 22 minutes. Copy ETA, Todd said. I have audible victims now. If I find stable access, I'm going to package and maintain until your team arrives. A hard exhale over the line. If you enter, you keep comms open and mark your route. No elevator shafts, no unsupported spans. If conditions degrade, you pull out. Understood? Understood. He dropped from the running board before either security guard could physically stop him and followed the dog around the corner. The metal panel he'd been scratching at wasn't a wall. It was a warped service door pulled half off its track, jammed open 6 inches at the bottom by drifted debris. Todd wedged his shoulder to it. Help me or don't, he called to the guards without looking back. But move. For 1 second, nothing happened. Then Radio Guy swore, shoved his shoulder beside Todd's, and together they forced the door high enough to crawl through. Inside smelled like wet cardboard, oil, and something acrid that prickled the throat. The beam from Todd's headlamp, snatched from his bag with shaking hands, caught rows of idle sorting conveyors, mountains of baled fabric, and black water coursing across the concrete floor. The current tugged at his shins immediately. He cracked a chem light and clipped it to the door frame. Another at the first left turn. Another at a fork where one corridor dipped too low. Victims, call out, he shouted. A child's voice answered from above, thin and hoarse. Here, we're here. The dog barked once and splashed ahead, not reckless now, precise, choosing spots where submerged floor stayed level, avoiding debris that shifted under current. Todd followed exactly where those paws landed. He could hear the security guard behind him breathing hard and muttering, "This is insane, this is insane," like prayer beads. At the base of a stairwell, the main steps were blocked by collapsed shelving. The dog darted past it to a narrow service stair hidden behind mesh cages of old inventory bins. Easy to miss, unless you knew it existed. The mesh door had rusted shut. Todd kicked near the latch. It gave on the 3rd hit. Battalion 7, interior access gained, he said into the phone wedged between shoulder and ear. Using East Service stairwell, likely to mezzanine offices. Marked path with green chem lights from South Service entry. Copy interior access, command answered immediately now. Primary engine 10 minutes out. Keep updates every 60 seconds. They climbed. At the top landing, water had not reached yet, but cold seeped up through the metal grating. An office door stood warped inward, jammed by a filing cabinet. Small fists banged the other side. "Todd!" a girl cried. "Dad can't wake up." I'm here, he said, voice as steady as he could make it. Back away from the door. He and the guard shoved together. The cabinet scraped, tipped, and the door opened. Two children huddled in a corner under a plastic banner ripped from the wall. The older boy, Marco from the flyer, hair plastered to his forehead, had one arm wrapped around the younger girl, Lena, whose purple coat cuff showed one row of tiny white stars, where its glove was missing. Between them and the desk, their father lay on his side in a refinery jacket, lips bluish, skin ash-pale under stubble, breathing in shallow, rattling pulls that paused too long between each one. The dog squeezed past Todd and went straight to Lena, pressing his wet body against her knees. She grabbed his neck and started sobbing soundlessly. Todd dropped to the father first. "Sir, can you hear me? Open your eyes." No response. Pulse fast and thready at the carotid, skin ice cold. Chemical burn rash around the neck where collar gaped. Breath carried a bitter solvent note that made Todd's own eyes water. Exposure plus cold, plus who knew how long. "What's his name?" Todd asked while he snapped on gloves from his kit. "Rafa," Marco said, voice trying to be adult and failing. "He said stay up high. He went down and then he came back and fell." "How long ago?" Marco shook his head. "Night. A long night." Todd got the pulse ox on Rafa's finger. It struggled, red, dropped, red again. 82, then 79. He swore softly and pulled the small oxygen cylinder from the trauma bag, attaching a non-rebreather mask with hands that remembered every training drill. He cracked the valve. Flow hissed. Rafa's chest rose a little deeper on the next breath, then hitched. "Marco, Lena, you're doing great," Todd said. "I need you to keep talking to him. Tell him your names. Tell him where he is." Lena clung to the dog and whispered, "Daddy, Daddy, Daddy," into his fur. Todd wrapped Rafa in 2 thermal blankets and the plastic banner for a vapor barrier, tucking at the sides to trap what heat remained. He gave the kids spare foil wraps too, rubbed Lena's hands through the mylar until she winced and colour started to creep back into her fingers. He checked pupils, chest rise, respiratory rate. Bad but salvageable if they moved soon. "Battalion 7, patient update," he said into the phone. 3 victims located mezzanine east office. 2 pediatric mild hypothermia, conscious. 1 adult male critical, respiratory distress, suspected inhalational chemical exposure plus severe hypothermia. O2 sat initially high 70s, now low 80s on non-rebreather with portable cylinder. Need extraction priority alpha. "Copy all," command said. "Engine 2 minutes out, but technical rope delayed at flooded crossing. Hold position if structure stable." As if answering, a heavy thud echoed somewhere below, followed by the groan of metal under strain. Todd looked toward the stairwell. The waterline visible through the grating had climbed several inches since they came up. Security radio guy peered down and went white. "It's rising fast, like really fast." Todd nodded once, eyes on Rafa's breathing, counting each inhale and the seconds between. Rescue was coming, but coming was not here. He shifted the oxygen cylinder to preserve line slack, checked the remaining pressure, and did the math he didn't want to do. Not enough time to waste. Not enough oxygen to be wrong. Not enough time to waste. Not enough oxygen to be wrong. Todd looked from Rafa's face to the stairwell and made the call that felt least dangerous. "We move the kids first," he told the guard, "then come back with me for him." Radio guy, young, rainwater still dripping off his lashes, nodded too fast. "Name's Keenan," he said, as if offering it could make this less surreal. "I can carry the girl." Lena's grip tightened around the dog's neck. "No, I stay with Daddy." "You're staying with him," Todd said gently. "Just in a warmer place 1 floor down. Marco, you go first with Keenan. Keep one hand on the rail, one hand on the wall, slow and steady. Marco didn't argue. He stood because someone needed him to stand. The first step down shuddered under Keenan's boots. Todd froze. The metal complained with a low, vibrating moan that travelled up through the handrails. Below, black water banged drifting debris against support columns with wet, blunt thuds. A floating pallet struck something in the dark and spun away. "Back up," Todd said. Keenan backed up instantly, dragging Marco with him. Todd leaned over the landing and aimed his headlamp down the stairwell. The lower half of the service stairs had already disappeared into moving water, and what remained was carrying more weight than it was built for. One support bracket had torn loose from the wall and hung by a bolt, swaying each time current hit. "Battalion 7, Todd said into the phone. "Update. East service stair compromised below first landing. Not passable for pediatrics." Static answered first, then, "Copy compromised stairs. Hold position. Primary engine on exterior side now, establishing entry." A voice shouted from far below, firefighters in SCBA calling to one another, but it sounded distant, swallowed by machinery and rain hammering the roof. Todd moved to the office window and wiped condensation with his sleeve. Through slats in the warped blinds, he could see flashing red reflected in floodwater outside. Help was here. Just not here yet. Then Keenan's radio exploded with feedback, and a different voice pushed through. "Wexler Unit 2, report status." Keenan lifted it. "Unit 2 interior with medical responder and 3 victims. East mezzanine office. Access route marked with chem lights. Need immediate extraction team." "Negative," the supervisor barked. "You are not authorized interior rescue. Evacuate now. Repeat, evacuate now." Keenan looked at Todd, then at the children, then at Rafa's grey lips behind the oxygen mask. "Tell your supervisor to get in line," Todd said. Keenan swallowed and keyed up again. "Unable to comply. We have critical patient." The supervisor's answer came clipped and furious. "You are outside scope and liability. Exit immediately or you're terminated effective now." For a second, Keenan just stood there, rainwater still dripping off his jacket onto the office tile, as if the threat had physically struck him. "Do what you need to do," Todd told him, softer. No judgment. Keenan's jaw flexed. He unclipped the radio, set it on the desk, and nudged it away with 2 fingers like it was something dead. "Guess I'm terminated." The dog barked once, approving or impatient or both, and paced to the hallway. Todd followed the sound with his eyes and noticed something he'd missed. A narrow catwalk beyond the office wall, used to access old conveyor motors. It ran along the interior perimeter toward a loading crane alcove on the opposite side of the building. Not meant for people. Maybe still intact. "Marco," Todd said, "did you and your dad come up here on stairs?" Marco shook his head. "Ladder by the belts, then through there." He pointed to the catwalk door. "Dad said don't step in the middle." A root, barely. Todd snapped another chem light and tossed it down the hall toward the catwalk entrance. Green light spun and settled. He keyed his phone. "Battalion 7, possible alternate egress via North Catwalk to Crane Alcove. Unknown integrity." "Do not commit victims to unassessed catwalk," command said immediately. "Technical rescue evaluating from below. Stand by." Stand by. Todd looked at Rafa's chest. Inhale, pause. Inhale, longer pause. He adjusted the mask seal and felt cold condensation against his knuckles. The oxygen hiss had softened. Cylinder pressure dipped under a quarter. What he had built in the last 15 minutes, a found route, marked path, airway support, kids no longer hidden and silent, was being squeezed from every side. Water, time, policy, physics. If the storm won this next stretch, he would lose all 3. It happened in 30 ugly seconds. Todd had Rafa positioned on the floor with blankets tucked and Lena warming his hands while Marco counted breaths out loud. Keenan was at the hall checking the catwalk door with a pry bar he'd scavenged from a utility closet. Todd was on the phone trying to give command a structural description when the building shifted. Not a noise at first, a movement. The mezzanine dipped an inch, then settled with a punch that knocked everyone sideways. Ceiling tiles burst free. Somewhere below, steel screamed against steel. The dog flattened, ears back, teeth bared at nothing visible. Then came the sound, a deep crack, like a tree splitting in ice. "Everybody down!" Todd shouted. A section of office wall sheared at the corner seam and dropped, smashing the desk and taking Todd's phone with it. The screens skittered under filing cabinets and went black in standing water. Comms gone. Keenan lunged for Marco as the boy stumbled. The pry bar clanged off the floor and disappeared through a gap where tile had just opened, revealing dark, moving water below. Lena shrieked and clamped both arms around the dog's ribs so hard he yelped. Rafa stopped breathing. Todd was beside him in an instant, 2 fingers at carotid. Pulse, faint, but there. He tilted Rafa's head, swept for obstruction, squeezed the bag valve from his kit against the oxygen mask to force a breath. Nothing. He checked the line. The regulator had cracked where the cylinder had slammed into the wall. Oxygen leaked in a thin, screaming jet from the side seam. He tightened, reseated, cursed, tried again. Pressure needle fell anyway. No immediate fix. He pulled the mask, sealed his mouth over Rafa's with a barrier from the trauma kit, and delivered 2 rescue breaths by hand. Rafa's chest rose shallowly, then fell with a wet rattle that sounded like drowning from the inside. "Marco," Todd said without looking up, "I need you to count with me. 1 breath every 6 seconds. Loud." Marco's voice shook but held. 1, 2, 3. Todd ventilated, counted, checked pulse, repeated. He could feel his own arms tiring already. This was not sustainable for transport, not with collapsing floor and 2 hypothermic kids. Keenan limped over. His ankle had rolled in the shift, swelling visible through his soaked pant leg. "Catwalk doors open," he said through clenched teeth. "But first 10 feet are bent down." Todd kept breathing for Rafa. "Can it hold 1 person?" Maybe, not him on a carry. Maybe doesn't carry 3 patients. Another rumble from below. Water surged against the mezzanine supports hard enough to spray up through gaps in the floor like blowholes. The office temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees in a minute. Lena was shivering violently now, lips pale. Todd felt the first clean blade of doubt slice through him. He had left an ER full of people who needed him. He had ignored a direct order. He had dragged an underpaid security guard into a lethal building. And now his oxygen was dying, his comms were dead, and the only route down was failing under flood force. If he'd misjudged this by even a little, he hadn't saved anyone. He'd simply moved the place they died. The dog pressed against Todd's shoulder, whining low, then suddenly jerked away and pawed at the broken wall where the desk had fallen. Todd followed the movement, reached into cold water and splintered drywall, and found his phone. Screen cracked. Dead. He banged it once against his palm, pointless reflex. Keenan held up his own radio. "Mine still receives sometimes. Doesn't transmit well inside." "Then climb to that catwalk junction and hold it over your head until it catches." Todd gave 2 more breaths. Rechecked pulse. Still there. Barely. "Tell them we lost oxygen support and patient's peri-arrest." Keenan hesitated, looking at his ankle, at the bent catwalk, at the children. Todd met his eyes. "I can't do everything at once." Keenan nodded and went, half hobbling into the hall. Todd kept breathing for Rafa and counting with Marco's voice, and the uncertainty became physical, an ache between his ribs, a pressure that had nothing to do with exertion. He couldn't solve this in one clever move. He couldn't improvise a new cylinder out of floodwater and hope. He could only hold a failing line and pray the outside world reached them before that line snapped. Across town, Carla had not sat down in 48 minutes. Street. Bridget's ER had turned into controlled triage chaos. 6 hallway stretchers, 1 trauma overflow in radiology, 2 generators running because part of the East Wing had lost power during a transformer pop. Every monitor tone felt louder than normal, as if adrenaline sharpened frequencies. She signed orders standing up, delegated with clipped precision, and rewrote staffing grids on the back of lab requisitions because the printer had jammed and no one had time to unjam it. She fielded calls from administration asking for updates she didn't have, then hung up on a board member who wanted to know whether that nurse who left with a dog was an official hospital action. Then Mendez handed her a portable radio patched to Fire Command and said, "You should hear this directly." So she did. She heard Todd's early updates, steady, clinical, maddeningly calm, and hated that she could picture exactly how his mouth set when he chose a course no one could talk him out of. She heard him report O2 sat in the 70s like he was presenting a case in daylight rounds instead of kneeling in a flooded ruin. She heard the battalion chief tell him not to freelance heroics, and heard Todd say, "Copy," in the tone that meant, "I heard you," not necessarily, "I'll obey you." Then, at 8:14, the feed broke into static. No further transmission from his phone. Carla kept moving because people in front of her needed her hands. But inside, fear started tunneling through the compartments she usually kept sealed. There had been other nights like this. Different disasters. Same fluorescent light. Same impossible arithmetic of who got what resources first. Years ago, before charge nurse, before the hard edges, she'd frozen once when a pediatric airway crashed in triage. 3 seconds, maybe 4, while everyone looked at her waiting for direction. The resident stepped in, the kid survived, and no one ever spoke of it again. But Carla had gone home afterward and sat on her kitchen floor until noon because she couldn't stop hearing the mother scream. She had promised herself then, never freeze, never indulge feelings on shift, never let attachment blur protocol. Todd made that promise difficult. He did infuriating things like buying cab rides out of pocket and then pretending accounting had approved it. He took extra psych holds without complaint because he could calm people no sedation touched. He remembered names. He noticed stray dogs carrying clues no one else saw. He made her furious precisely because he moved by conscience first and paperwork second, and a part of her, buried, inconvenient, alive, loved him for it. Loved. There she admitted it to herself in the space between overhead pages. Not a crush, not shift-friend fondness. Love, with all the liability that word implied. And she might have signed the form that sent him to his death. Carla braced both hands on the nurse's station for 2 breaths, head down. When she looked up, Mendez was watching her with a question he didn't voice. "You did what you had to do," he said anyway, softer than usual. "No," Carla said. "I documented what he was going to do no matter what I said." Her voice cracked on the last word. She swallowed it back. "If he doesn't come back, that signature's still mine." Mendez nodded like a man who had stood too many perimeters and understood helplessness professionally. The radio crackled. Keenan's voice came through thin and broken. "Interior mezzanine, lost oxygen, adult male peri-arrest, need immediate." Then static swallowed the rest. Carla grabbed the mic before command could answer. "This is Charge Nurse Carla Nguyen, St. Bridget's. I know that medic. He will not call peri-arrest unless it's bad. If you have any way to expedite entry, do it now. A pause. Then Battalion 7 tighter than before. Understood, St. Bridget's. We are pushing an interior team, but structural movement is active. Tell your nurse to hold if he receives. Carla closed her eyes for half a second. Tell him, she said, voice low and raw. He doesn't get to be right if he doesn't survive it. She set the mic down before anyone could hear her breathe. The radio reached them 2 minutes later, hissing from Keenan's outstretched hand at the catwalk junction. Todd Sullivan, if you copy, hold position. Repeat, hold position until technical rope unit reaches east mezzanine. Estimated 8 minutes. 8 minutes. Todd knelt in cold water and delivered another breath to Rafa, while Marco counted and Lena shook, and the dog paced tight circles, nails clicking frantic rhythms on buckling floor. Battalion, this is Todd, he shouted toward Keenan's radio, not sure if it carried. Patient apneic without assisted ventilation. I cannot sustain 8 minutes plus movement prep. No answer at first. Then, copy. We are 2 minutes from visual. Hold. The mezzanine jolted again, harder. A long crack raced across the office floor tile from door to desk, opening a finger-width seam that immediately filled with black water pushing up from below. In the hallway, one of Todd's green chem lights winked out as current took it. Keenan lurched back from the catwalk entrance. Support beam just dropped, he said, face bloodless. Whole spans sagging. Todd looked to the hall. The bent catwalk was now bowed like a drawn bowstring, center section trembling each time debris struck below. Unusable for a stretcher. Maybe usable once, for a child, if luck held. Maybe. Rafa's pulse fluttered under Todd's fingers. There, gone. There again. Marco, Todd said, fighting to keep his tone level. I need you to put your sister's hood up and keep her eyes on me. Don't look at the floor. Marco did it, hands clumsy with cold. From outside came a new sound over rain and sirens, the metallic ping of a ladder hitting brick, then shouted commands growing louder. Rescue at the wall, not yet in the room. Another crack split the ceiling seam. Dust and droplets rained down. The office doorframe twisted with a pop, no longer square. Hold position, the radio barked again. Do not initiate movement until rope team anchors. Todd stared at Rafa's grey face, at the children, at the sinking line of floodwater rising on the wall 1 inch at a time. The floor under his knees dipped. He had seconds to decide whether obeying would kill them anyway. He had seconds to decide whether obeying would kill them anyway. Todd looked at Rafa's pulse under his fingers, fluttering, vanishing, returning like a failing signal, and made the only call he could live with. We move now, he said. Keenan stared at him. Command said hold. Then command can write me up later. Todd slid his arms under Rafa's shoulders and hauled him onto a rolling pallet, Jack parked against the office wall, its wheels rusted but intact. I need this to glide, not carry. Help me center him. Marco's face went rigid with fear. Is my dad dying? Todd met the boy's eyes. Not if we keep him breathing and keep moving. He stripped off his soaked slicker, folded it twice, and wedged it under Rafa's head to keep the airway aligned. Then he unspooled a trauma strap and cinched Rafa's torso to the pallet handle so he wouldn't slide off when the floor pitched. Lena clung to the dog's neck, shaking too hard to stand. Todd wrapped her inside a thermal blanket, pulled her against his chest, and tied the foil corners behind his back, with a square knot he'd learned on wilderness drills he never thought he'd use. Her small arms locked around his neck. Can't breathe, she whispered. You can. Slow with me. He took one exaggerated inhale until she copied him, then another. Good. You stay right here and hold on. He shoved 2 remaining chem lights into Marco's hands. You are my lead light. Keep these up where I can see them. One hand on the rail, one on the wall, and do not stop unless I say stop. Marco nodded once, jaw clenched. Keenan tested the pallet jack wheels. One caught, then freed with a metallic shriek. Catwalk first 10 feet abowed. Then we spread weight. Todd glanced to the dog. Buddy, go. The brindle dog darted into the hall, stopped at the catwalk entrance, and barked 3 sharp times like punctuation. Keenan keyed his radio as they rolled out. Unit 2 moving victims via North Catwalk. Repeat moving now. East mezzanine unstable. Static. Then Battalion 7, furious and immediate. Unit 2, abort. Rope team is at exterior window in 90 seconds. A crack ripped through the corridor ceiling. A section of fluorescent fixture fell and exploded at their heels. Todd didn't answer. He couldn't spare breath. They reached the catwalk. It was narrower than he'd hoped, steel grating slick with condensation, and river spray, blowing through broken clear-story windows. The center sagged visibly. 30 feet below, floodwater churned through conveyor housings and torn pallets with a constant grinding roar. Marco, left edge, Todd said. Small steps. Marco moved. Keenan went opposite edge, using the pallet jack handle to keep Rafa centered. Todd took the rear, one arm around Lena, the other hand under Rafa's shoulder to steady each bump. The dog trotted ahead on the catwalk beam itself, impossible balance, glancing back every 3 steps as if counting them. Halfway across, the whole span dipped with a deep, metallic groan. Freeze, Todd said. No one breathed. Even Lena went still against his chest. Below, a refrigerator-sized crate slammed into a support column. The catwalk shuddered, bolts squealing. One anchor plate sheared with a pistol crack and spun away into the water. Move, Todd said, voice low and flat. Now. No running. Marco's chem light bobbed in front of them like a tiny green lighthouse. Keenan pushed, grimacing through his ankle pain. Todd kept the pallet from fishtailing by brute force and leverage, shoulders burning. Behind them, steel popped again. They reached the far platform as the center section dropped 6 inches and stayed there, trembling. Keenan gasped a laugh that sounded like a sob. Did we just— Not done, Todd said. The crane alcove opened into a sloped loading corridor with corrugated walls and waist-deep black water surging toward the docks. Exit signs flickered on emergency battery, red arrows strobbing through spray. Far ahead, he could hear firefighters shouting, but the sound bounced in echoes. Impossible to place. Todd checked Rafa's face. Lips still blue, breath shallow but present from movement and positioning. He squeezed the BVM once between steps to keep oxygen moving through whatever pressure remained. Marco, eyes on the exit lights, he called over the roar. Talk to your sister. Marco looked back. Lena, tell me your birthday. She blinked against Todd's shoulder. February 6. Good. Favorite cereal? Chocolate 1. Name every color in your room. As long as they were answering each other, they were oriented, awake, fighting. Then the flood surged. It came from behind, a sudden backwash when something massive gave way upstream. Water punched down the corridor hard enough to lift the pallet jack's front wheels and throw Keenan sideways. Rafa's body slid, strap biting into his jacket, and the whole load yawed toward a jagged gap where the floor had collapsed around a drain channel. Keenan! Todd shouted. Keenan grabbed for the handle and missed, palms skidding off algae-slick steel. The pallet jack tilted toward the gap, Rafa's shoulder hanging over open water. Todd had one secure foothold on a ribbed concrete seam. If he kept it, he could hold Lena and maybe keep Marco upright. If he let go, he might lose all footing, but he could reach Rafa. He let go. Water took his legs instantly. He slammed chest first into the pallet, hooked an elbow through Rafa's strap, and caught dead weight as it tipped. Pain shot through his shoulder. Lena screamed into his collar. The gap below boiled with debris and oily foam. "Marco, keep moving!" Todd yelled, voice ragged. "Follow the dog! Don't turn around!" The dog was already ahead, barking in rapid bursts from the red exit glow. Marco stumbled forward, then forced himself on, one hand on wall, one hand with chem light high, exactly as instructed. Keenan belly crawled through water, got both hands on the pallet frame, and heaved with a guttural shout. Together, they levered Rafa back from the edge. The jack slammed flat, just as another section of floor crumbled into the drain channel behind them. From somewhere close now, "Fire! Fire department! Call out!" "Here!" Todd screamed. 3 patients plus 2 rescuers, north loading corridor." Helmet lights burst through the haze at the dock threshold. 2 firefighters in dry suits clipped to tether lines, one medic behind them with a basket stretcher. They splashed forward, one grabbing Marco by the shoulders and shepherding him to the door, the other taking Lena from Todd's chest with practiced hands. Todd tried to stand and his knee folded. Keenan caught him under one arm. "Adult male critical," Todd shouted, already handing over clinical info while they transferred Rafa to the basket. "Likely inhalational solvent exposure, severe hypothermia, intermittent apnea, pulse thready, assisted breaths en route." "Got him," the medic said. "You're done. Move!" The word done didn't register until they crossed the loading dock threshold into open storm air and floodlights and anchored ropes and 20 moving bodies in turnout gear. Behind them, the mezzanine gave way. The collapse sounded like a freight train entering a tunnel, a rolling concussion of steel, concrete, glass, and water hitting water. Everyone on the dock instinctively ducked. A plume of spray and dust blasted out the corridor they had just cleared, showering the dock in grit and broken insulation. Todd dropped to one knee in runoff, chest heaving, and watched the doorway where they'd been seconds earlier disappear under twisted metal. Keenan sat down hard beside him and started laughing uncontrollably, then choking, then laughing again. The dog shook himself once, spraying dirty water in an arc, then trotted to Marco and Lena and leaned his whole body against their legs while they cried. Fire Command strode up, face hidden behind a visor beaded with rain. "You Sullivan?" Todd nodded, unable to find voice. The chief looked at the destroyed doorway, then back at him. "You disobeyed a direct hold order." Todd swallowed. "Yes, sir." A beat. The chief jerked a thumb at the basket team sprinting Rafa toward the ambulance. "And you beat our collapse window by about 40 seconds. He leaned closer so only Todd could hear over the storm. "Don't make me say thank you while I'm still mad." Then he turned and started shouting new commands. The fight wasn't over just because they were outside. At the dock, chaos had a new shape. Hazmat techs arguing with county deputies over contamination zones, stretcher wheels sticking in flooded potholes, radios stepping on each other with 3 agencies on overlapping channels. The storm kept trying to scatter everything humans assembled. Rafa's basket stretcher hit a bottleneck at the decon tent. A Wexler supervisor in a white hard hat blocked the lane with both arms spread, screaming over the rain. "Not through here. Potential solvent contamination. County protocol says full decon before transport." The medic at the stretcher head snarled back. "He won't survive a 10-minute rinse." The supervisor pointed at a clipboard inside a plastic sleeve, as if laminated policy could stop hypoxia. "Liability is on my site if you bypass." Todd was moving before he realized he'd stood up. Every muscle in his body protested. "He aspirates again. Your liability becomes a homicide investigation," he said, voice hoarse but carrying. "He needs airway, heat, and hospital now." The supervisor squared toward him, eyes sharp with bureaucratic adrenaline. And you are? Triage RN, who's been ventilating him in a collapsing building for 20 minutes. I don't care if you're the Surgeon General. My name's on this incident log. Keenan limped up behind Todd, rain dripping off his nose. Mine's on it too. He goes. You were terminated 40 minutes ago, the supervisor snapped. Then write me up twice. The supervisor reached for the stretcher rail to physically stop movement. Todd slapped his hand away. Don't. Two deputies stepped in, unsure which authority to back. The delay stretched. Rafa's monitor, a portable clipped to the basket, chirped a narrow, complex tachyrhythm, then dropped signal when a lead peeled in rain. Battalion 7 to Dock 3, command barked over loudspeaker. Adult red tag from mezzanine gets immediate transport. Decon waiver approved by medical command. Clear lane now. The supervisor didn't move. For one breathless second, Todd thought they might literally wrestle a dying man through incident command politics in the mud. Then Lena's voice cut through it, thin but precise. That man saved my daddy. Move. Everyone turned. She stood wrapped in a fire blanket, hair plastered to her face, one hand on the dog's collar. Marco stood beside her, chin up in stubborn terror. The supervisor looked at them, then at the collapsed building, then back to the clipboard that suddenly seemed absurd in his grip. His shoulders dropped an inch. He stepped aside. Go, he muttered. The medics ran. Todd jogged with the stretcher to the ambulance, giving report in clipped bursts between breaths. Male, mid-30s, probable mixed solvent inhalation, severe hypothermia, intermittent apnea improved with assisted ventilation, possible aspiration event during movement, no obvious major trauma besides exposure. Ride in? The paramedic asked. Todd looked back at Marco and Lena under floodlights, both watching him as if he controlled gravity. He nodded. I'm in. Inside the ambulance, noise narrowed to monitor tones, oxygen hiss and paramedic commands. They intubated Rafa 2 blocks from street, Bridget's while the driver hydroplaned around downed branches and standing water. Todd held C-spine, then tube, then bagged between bumps, hands moving on training while his brain lagged behind, replaying the corridor gap over and over. At the ER bay, doors burst open to a team already waiting in decon gowns. Carla led them. Her eyes flicked over Todd in one brutal inventory. Soaked, bleeding from a scalp cut he hadn't noticed. Pupils reactive, standing. Relief flashed and vanished behind command mode. On my count, she snapped. 1, 2, 3, move. They transferred Rafa to Trauma 2. Respiratory took vent control. Lab drew blood through shaking gloved hands. Warmed IV fluids hung. Toxicology called from home. The machine started doing what it was built to do. Todd backed out of the room only when Carla shoved him by the shoulder. You're not useful if you pass out in my trauma bay, she said. He opened his mouth to argue and lost to dizziness. The floor tilted, then steadied when he grabbed the counter. His teeth chattered so hard he bit his tongue. Carla didn't soften. Mendez, get him to staff decon. Now. From down the hall came the sound of a little girl crying for her father. The dog barked once, then quieter noises. Someone from PEDS coaxing, a toy bin being dragged. The awkward gentleness of emergency staff, trying to become child-friendly with no warning. Todd sat on a bench in decon while warm water hammered chemical residue from his skin, and rust-coloured runoff spiraled down the drain. His hands were shaking not from cold anymore, but from the delayed tremor of almost. Keenan sat 2 benches down with his ankle wrapped and an ER blanket around his shoulders. He stared at nothing for a while, then said, Think they'll really fire me? Todd gave a tired half-laugh. If they do, Saint. Bridget's needs security staff who run toward disasters. Keenan managed a grin. You recruiting from a shower stall now? Multitasking. A tech stepped in. Mr. Sullivan, sheriff wants statement when you're cleared. Also, kids are asking for the dog, not social worker. Todd closed his eyes briefly. Dog okay? Better than all of you. By late afternoon, Stormlight turned from iron grey to the weak yellow of post-rain exhaustion. St. Bridget's hummed at that strange tempo after mass casualty surges. Still busy, but with pockets of stunned quiet where people finally noticed their own bodies again. Todd sat in an empty consult room wrapped in hospital scrubs 2 sizes too big, scalp sutured, left shoulder strapped, chart notes spread in front of him. Every time he stopped writing, images rushed back, the catwalk drop, the supervisor's hand on the rail, Lena's voice saying, "Move." A knock. Carla entered without waiting. She closed the door with her heel and leaned against it, arms folded. For once, she had no clipboard, no assignment sheet, no charge nurse armor except the expression she wore when she needed not to cry at work. "You gave me the worst hour of my career," she said. Todd nodded. "I know. You disobeyed me in writing." "Also true." "You bypassed police perimeter, entered an unstable structure, and turned a missing patient lead into an unauthorized field extraction." He exhaled. "That sounds bad when you list it like that." It was bad. Her jaw tightened. "And if you had died, I would have had to explain to this hospital why I signed a leave form that sent one of my best nurses into a collapse zone chasing a stray dog." Todd looked down at his bandaged hands. "I didn't chase a dog. I followed evidence I couldn't ignore." Silence stretched. Carla stepped forward, dropped a folder on the table. Inside, Incident Commendation Draft from Fire Command, Preliminary Morbidity Report, and an internal notice titled Administrative Review. Temporary suspension, pending investigation. "They're suspending you for 48 hours while risk management pretends policies are clean and reality is messy," she said. "Fire Command is simultaneously recommending you for a civilian, life-saving citation." Todd gave a tired huff that might have been a laugh. Balanced outcome. Rafa Ortiz is intubated in ICU, but improving blood gases. Kids are rewarmed, no major injuries. Sheriff confirmed he hid them on the mezzanine when floodwater hit and went back down trying to shut off a leaking solvent line. Collapsed before he could get back up. She paused. "And the dog belonged to them." "Sort of. Family got evicted from a rental 3 months ago. Landlord dumped him when they moved to the motel. Kids thought he was gone." Todd felt something in his chest unclench and ache at the same time. He kept coming back. He did. Another quiet beat. Rain ticked weakly against the window. Carla drew a breath that seemed to cost her. "When comms went dead, I told Fire Command you don't get to be right if you don't survive it." Todd looked up. "I heard part of that through static." "Good." She sat across from him. "Because I need you to hear the rest in full volume." Her voice changed, still steady but stripped of rank. "I am not just angry because you broke protocol. I am angry because you matter to me in a way that makes protocol feel personal." She held his gaze even when his eyes widened. "I have spent years pretending that what I feel for you is professional admiration plus frustration. It isn't. I love you, Todd. I have for longer than is administratively convenient." He stared, stunned into stillness. Carla gave a humorless smile. "You can absolutely reject this while concussed. I picked timing terribly." "No," he said quickly, then winced as his shoulder pulled. "No, I'm just trying to catch up." He rubbed his palms on the oversized scrub pants, looked at the floor, then back at her. "I didn't say anything because I thought wanting this would make me reckless. Like, if I admitted it, I'd start making choices based on you, not patience." "You followed a dog into a flood," she said dryly. "Reckless has already happened." He laughed despite himself, then sobered. When I left, part of what scared me most wasn't dying. It was the idea of not getting back to tell you why I went. Carla's eyes filled but did not spill. Tell me now. Todd leaned forward, elbows on knees, voice low. Because every night we sort people by urgency and pretend that system is enough. Most nights it is. Last night it wasn't. That dog was the only one still carrying the alarm, and everybody else had reasons to dismiss him. I didn't want to be one more reason. He swallowed. And because you taught me that triage is about seeing what's in front of you, not what's convenient. Carla shook her head once. Don't romanticize me into your decision tree. I'm not. I'm saying you're part of who I am when it counts. She sat with that, then reached across the table, palm up. Todd put his hand in hers. Her fingers were warm and calloused from years of glove changes and chart flipping and holding pressure on wounds at 3 a.m. I can't do this half-hidden, she said. Not after today. If we do this, we do it honestly. We tell HR we follow policy. We don't let it bleed into patient care. Agreed. And you do not disappear into storms without backup ever again. He squeezed her hand. I'll try very hard to keep my disasters indoors. That is not the promise I asked for. He held her gaze. I promise I will come back. Something in her face finally softened. She stood, stepped around the table and kissed him, careful of stitches, firm enough to end any ambiguity. When she pulled back, she rested her forehead against his for a second. A knock snapped them apart. Mendez cracked the door with impeccable bad timing. Sorry, Pediatric wants to know if the hero nurse and the angry nurse can come meet someone. Carla straightened, wiped once under her eye, and returned to command voice in a heartbeat. We'll be there. Mendez grinned. For the record, angry nurse looked scarier than the flood. Peds Overflow had commandeered a quiet corner near the old vending machines. Marco sat on a gurney in dry hospital pajamas, Lena beside him wrapped in a dinosaur blanket. Between them, freshly towel-dried and wearing an improvised bandana someone had tied around his neck, sat the brindle dog. He saw Todd and stood instantly, tail thumping hard enough to rattle the IV pole. Lena slid off the gurney and ran the 3 steps before a social worker could stop her. She hugged Todd's legs, then looked up serious as a judge. Can he stay? She asked, clutching the dog's ear. His name used to be Rocket, but Marco says that's a baby name. Marco rolled his eyes. Because he's brave now. Carla crouched to their height. He can stay tonight while Animal Control and your aunt sign paperwork. After that, we make a plan. Lena considered this and nodded solemnly. Then his new name is Bridget, because this is Bridget Hospital. Todd glanced at Carla. She smiled, the real one. Bridget it is, Todd said. The dog, Bridget, leaned against his knee as if approving the vote. 6 weeks later, dawn came grey again, but the rain was ordinary rain, not an emergency. St. Bridget's boardroom smelled like burnt coffee and old carpet. Todd sat at one end in clean scrubs, while 3 administrators performed the ritual of institutional contradiction. Chief Nursing Officer Patel adjusted her glasses. Mr. Sullivan, this review panel finds you in violation of chain of command and off-site deployment policy. Todd nodded. Understood. She slid a second paper across. This same panel recognizes that your actions, in context, directly contributed to the survival of 3 civilians during an active flood collapse event. Recommendation. Formal reprimand in file. No suspension beyond time served. And appointment to drafting committee for Emergency Community Response Protocol. Todd blinked. You're putting me on policy. Patel's mouth twitched. If someone is going to break policy creatively, we prefer he help rewrite it intelligently. At the back of the room, Carla pretended to read a binder and failed to hide her smile. Later that morning, in the Ambulance Bay Conference alcove, County Animal Control, ED leadership, and two skeptical lawyers stood around a whiteboard titled ER Stray Alert Protocol. Mendez tapped the marker against bullet points. Step 1. Any repeat stray behavior at ambulance entrances gets logged with time, object, and direction of approach. An animal control officer added, Step 2. Cross-check with active missing persons and displacement reports before calling nuisance pickup. Carla pointed to the final line. Step 3. Designated liaison contacts field responders. No one follows an animal alone. Ever. Everyone looked at Todd. He raised both hands. I accept this as a personal clause. Laughter broke the tension. At noon, Todd stopped by rehab services where Keenan, now in a St. Brigid's security polo instead of Wexler black, practiced weight-bearing on his healed ankle while filling out new hire orientation forms. Told you we were recruiting, Todd said. Keenan snorted. Your onboarding process is violent. In ICU, Rafa Ortiz sat upright for the first time, oxygen cannula in place, color finally back in his face. Marco and Lena perched on either side of his bed, arguing over comic books. When Todd entered, Rafa's eyes filled and he gripped Todd's wrist with surprising strength. I don't remember much, Rafa said, voice rough. Just cold, and hearing my boy count. Marco looked proud and embarrassed all at once. Rafa's gaze shifted to the dog sprawled under Lena's chair. He found us when no one else did. Todd nodded. He didn't quit. Near shift change, pediatric therapy staff ran a small ceremony in the atrium. Brigid wore a proper red vest for the first time, still a little too big in the chest, with a patch reading, Community Comfort Canine, in training. Lena insisted on placing a paper badge sticker on his head anyway. He endured it with saintly patience. As the sky lightened toward morning, Todd headed for the ambulance bay doors, shoulders heavy with that specific overnight fatigue that felt almost like peace when no sirens were screaming. Carla fell into step beside him, coffee in hand, her other hand brushing his briefly before taking it outright when no one watched. Outside, under the overhang, puddles mirrored the fluorescent lights. Brigid trotted between them, paused at the exact spot where he used to leave gloves, and sat, tail sweeping the wet concrete. Todd looked at the empty threshold, then at the dog, then at the woman beside him. The doors sighed open behind them, not from bad news this time, just a housekeeping cart starting the day. End of shift? Carla asked. Todd squeezed her hand. Start of something. Brigid stood and nudged Todd's knee toward the lot, already ready for the next round. This time, when Todd followed, he wasn't alone.